Hi, this is a foreigner in the Philippines. Welcome, good morning. And we are waiting for Beth to do what she has to do, and then we're going off to Bai to check out our mother and child house, that work in progress, the latest in our house repair, building project, and we're going to be doing that fairly soon. While I'm sitting here, I've had my orders to make several videos. I'm just wondering what on earth I can talk about. But there's always plenty of things that are changing. In my life, things have really turned upside down, and I find myself, I'm a city boy from Manchester, lived most of my life in London, or as the Brits call it, the smoke, and I know very little about country life. I never thought that I would end up, that's a terrible phrase, isn't it? Never thought that I would be here at my time of life learning how to be a country boy. And yet, when we went to Dumaguete recently, that's compared to our little sleepy town of Itafi, well, that's more like a village, and the small town of Taliban, Dumaguete is a busy, bustling, thriving, over traffic laden city in our mind. So it was a huge change for us to be seeing that. And though we enjoyed it and were spoiled to death, of course, by our good friend Joy, who was our host, we were glad to get home to our life here, sleepy though it is for most people. Right, so really what we're really looking at here is how our life is. Now, when Beth and I decided that we were going to come and live in Bohol, I'd had one visit and walked up that path, which for me, carrying a suitcase, a small suitcase, seemed like a million miles. You know, it's actually probably under 2 miles, but in fact it's over rough ground, it's up hills, down hills, narrow path, wide rocky path, and it's a challenge. So we came back and we looked at the way that Nanai lives. She'd only just got power. In fact, we helped out financially with that, about getting power under Aquino's. Back then it was Aquino that was in power, and he had a dream of getting power to people in these outlying country situations. So yes, we had very, very simple, basic power. A few plugs. I finally got a television, able to have that. This is for the first time in something like 47 years that Nanai had been able to sit in her living room and watch a television. It really is amazing. Not particularly a great thing in my mind, but she loved it. So anyway, we came and we had a look at what was happening here. I saw Manorado. I saw him working in the fields. My introduction to Manorado was he waved his hand. He knew who I was. He knew Beth was bringing home her foreigner, and he went like that. He didn't come out to meet me. He's got work to do, and he's there with his carabao ploughing a field. So I met there. I met Nanai. I saw what a biblical life that she leads every night. At the end of the day, she would sit and read her Bible. We did all kinds of things that I wasn't used to. We said grace before a meal. Lots of different things. Everything was hand washed. There was no washer dryer. All of the food was cooked on an open fire in a kitchen where you breathed in a lot of the smoke that cooked your food. Um, for a foreigner, quite a well, quite a horrific experience in a lot of ways. We slept on the floor. I mean, for me, it was just like, it was like camping out, where you might go and stay at somebody's place, and it's a big party, and everybody just ends up flaked out on the floor. But no, we slept on the floor for over a year, and we just had a very basic cushion, which was about 3 inches thick. So we slept like that for a long time. No privacy, because a house built in the Philippines is not built for privacy. It's built to get you out of the weather, and the top of the wall is completely open. So our bedroom, such as it was completely open at the top of the wall to Nanai's, and to the living room, and to every other place, I don't know, for outside. So no, absolutely no privacy at all. And when we started to build a house, we actually decided that well, why don't we just build a little tiny house, a little bit like Lena's house, which is like 10 by 10, I think. Might be a tiny bit bigger now, because she's extended it to a kitchen. But it was just tiny. Why don't we just build a tiny house of our own that we can sleep in, and we do everything else at Nanai's house, but we'll do this. Well, that was the plan. But from that, and I knew that I couldn't start using building blocks and mixing concrete and cement and doing it that way, which would have been probably the Filipino way to do it when we started. So I chose materials that I could handle myself. When I spoke to Timio, my brother-in-law, he said, well, you'll need some help with the walls. And I said, well, I'm going to build it in metal stud, which he knew nothing about. So a lot of the time in those early days, everybody was looking at me as if I was that crazy foreigner. I'm getting used to that now. But I started with a platform. And so when I got Manarado to bring along some tugas posts. Tugas is a good wood for that the termites don't particularly like, although it still has to be treated. So we put in 4 posts, and then Beth said, well, why don't we make it a bit bigger? And that became the mantra then for the house. So we extended it from about 12 feet to 25 feet. So 25 feet by, I think, 13. And then I realized, well, if I design this right, I can put 2 roofs in, and the second roof can be that much higher than the first, and we can have a bedroom. So the thing evolved and it got bigger. Well, 2 years later, it still wasn't finished, and one of our neighbours who used to pass through on a caravel always used to look at the house, and he used to say to Nanai, yeah, it's a project house, meaning it'll never be finished. Nearly 3 years later, he is actually still right, because we only just got one of the 2 doors we needed to make the place secure. So we now have a door, but it fits so badly that I'm going to have to replace it and build one myself. We got the carpenter who worked on the guest house to build us a door and a frame, and it didn't work out so well. So I'm going to have to do that again myself. So what changes did we go through? Well, actually, we never intended to stay in Bohol. We intended to go, I think, to our what was then something of say a part 1 dream, for Beth to be able to travel and for me to live as a retiree in a place that was kind to retirees, and that was Panama, which apparently is good to retire to because there's a very good exchange rate and the economy is such that my modest pension allowed us to live quite comfortably. Well, it allows us to live quite comfortably here, and what we did was we paid month by month for the materials to build our house, like a lot of people do. We paid that out of my pensions. So we had a little bit of help on this, because prior to coming here we lived in Basak, which is I guess the ghetto part of, or one of the ghetto parts, not quite so bad, in Cebu, and we lived there for quite a while. Now we couldn't move because we were only paying 3,000 pesos for our rent, and we were living really very cheaply. Now this was good because right about that time I failed to answer a letter by the SS, the Social Security in America. They send out a letter every so often to people who are retired in other countries, and you're meant to answer that letter in a "yes, I'm still alive" kind of vein, and I didn't get that letter that they sent, so they stopped my pension, and that's the way that they work. Well, they stopped the bigger pension of the two. I get one from the UK, a tiny one from the UK, and we were able to live on that one from the UK. The one from the US took months to get that reinstated. It might have been as long as 3 or 4 months, and that was the early part of our life together, scraping by on a tiny pension from the UK, and we did that. But the positive side of that was that at the end of it, the SS US actually paid all of the back pension. So we got a lump sum that enabled us to make the move to Bohol, where we were going to live very frugally, save all our money, and go and have another life in Panama. Well, then we started on the house, and as I say, that brought us up to now. So we're still not finished on the house, and we are beginning now to start. So one of the many changes that happened and will happen to any expat coming over here is that, in a way, an expat is coming to have another life, and depending on the way that he approaches his life, he may find huge changes. Now, how he adapts to those huge changes is always the point of discussion. A lot of expats come over and they have the money to be able, in a way, to duplicate the kind of life at a much lower cost that they used to have in America or the UK. And they come over and they can live in a very nice place, probably renting, or they can marry, find the right person. I'm not going to go into horror stories because there's plenty of people that love to do that and tell about their sad stories. I had my own. It didn't all work out for me right at the very beginning. I got taken a few times by different people. And it happens, you know. Sometimes you're not paying attention. Sometimes you're living in hope that everything is just going to be so wonderful. And that's how you behave. But that reminds me of the story where it says, expecting that people will treat you fairly because you're a nice guy is a little bit like expecting that the bull will not charge you in the field just because you're a vegetarian. you can be as nice a guy as you like, but you still have to count your change. So we came here. We then had to change. I had to change. I had to look at things differently, and I count the fact that I'm a relatively happy man and at peace with the world because I was willing to change. Now, there are people who come over and they duplicate a life here, and I've talked about this before. They duplicate a life here which is similar to what they had in America. That didn't seem to be the way to me. I was looking at peoples who seemed to be much, much happier than I saw people in America. That's where I spent the previous 20 or so years. And when everything went in the toilet, when the real estate market crashed, lost house, lost marriage, got a divorce, came over here, a divorced man with everything gone, and a couple of grand dollars, and a pension. But the pension allowed me to have a reasonable life here. Modest, but reasonable. I never had to worry about getting a bill. Hardly had any bills. I had the rent and the electric, and that was about it. That's all I paid, and then food. So I actually enjoyed life, even though it was very, very simple. I met Beth, and I came over to Bohol, which is where we are now. Came temporary, stayed permanent, because we found where most people wander around saying, I wonder what my mission is, what am I supposed to do, what am I here for, and all of those questions. And those questions for me were answered very simply. I think it's been said that the people who actually are the happiest, well, let me give you the research. The research that I read about was that given a situation where you receive as opposed to where you give, which makes you the happiest? And the research shows that giving makes you happier than receiving. See, somebody can buy you, and we see this with the two children that we have in our lives, the two main children, Talek and Balalut. And compared to the life that they used to have prior to us coming and living here, they live as almost as comparatively okay, and on a comparative basis, they feel like they're rich kids. I looked at Talek when we were looking over those two rag houses that we've been talking about doing next. I looked over at Talek. She's 11 years old. She's a lovely girl. She's dressed very, very nicely. And I thought then, compared to the kids that we're looking at the families of now, she was like a princess. So her viewpoint has changed of life, and so has Balalut. And Balalut thinks nothing now of going out and eating in a restaurant, whereas before we called him the wolf. When we took him out to eat, he would actually hoard food and bring it home. He bought him 2 pieces of chicken. He brought 1 piece of chicken home with him for later because he didn't know when he was going to eat next. So I'm looking at this is a long talk again, and my friend Jeff, JLB, Philippines Fun, has told me that most people can't struggle through to the end of a 20-minute talk, so I better wind up. So, change. If you're coming, be ready for change, and be willing and embrace it, and you'll be happier. This is a foreigner in the